Hey, Orange One here. So in this tutorial I'm going to talk about different armor and weapon types and where you can find those in case of CUD. So if you are looking for more details on armor values and dodge values, I have my damage tutorial, but I'm going to be talking about big picture, the differences between these. In general, items can be made of different materials. So if I look at, I've collected a number of melee weapons here. There's a couple wood items or like very simplistic things, and they typically just show up as white or regular text. And then above that you'll see bronze. Bronze is a little bit better than like wood. Then there's iron, which is a little bit better. Steel, which is better than that. And then there's carbide. I don't actually, or I do have folded carbide, but this one's got some weird extra dimensional stuff going on with it. But folded carbide is a lighter blue color. There's also fullerite, which is a little bit better than folded carbide. Then there's crysteel, and then there's also flawless crysteel, which looks very similar to crysteel. It just says flawless in front of it. And then there's zetachrome, which I don't think I have any melee weapons that are zetachrome, but I do have some armor that's zetachrome. This is the best stuff in the game. You're not going to find this really until you get to the end game, but it is the end all be all armor, hence the name Zeta, right? So with armor in general, the stats get better as you go down that list. With one kind of exception, fullerite is definitely better than folded carbide in terms of protection, but it will weigh you down, like a lot. It's super heavy. Fullerite is basically like sci-fi concrete. You can kind of think of it like that. So it just weighs like twice or 3 times as much as any other armor. So if you look at this fullerite longsword that I've got here, that longsword weighs 9. An iron longsword weighs 5, so it weighs like pretty much twice what that weighs. Carbide 6 goes down there. Crysteel is actually still fairly heavy, but if I'm looking at some of the body armor, it's not so bad. I don't have any of the body armor on me right now, but it's just trust me on this. Fullerite is not something you're gonna be wearing unless either you are a high strength character or you've got multiple legs. It just weighs too much, quite simply. But crysteel is not so bad. And also fullerite has some variations like flaked fullerite armor, which is a little bit more lighter. It's like their chainmail. If we're talking about weapons, it's kind of interesting because not only do these more advanced weapons like the folded carbide, not only do they have bigger dice that they're rolling, like look, the bronze only has a 1d2 and the folded carbide has a 1d8. Not only is that number bigger, which means, you know, on average that dice roll is gonna give you a bigger number. Duh, that's kind of straightforward. But in addition to that, a lot of these guys, you roll multiple dice. So fullerite, yeah, gives you a 1d12. The crysteel gives you 2d6, which has a slightly higher average, but it's more reliable damage. It's just better to have that reliable damage. You're not going to get as many big hits, but you're not going to get as many bad hits as well. And in addition to that, as you get these better ones, you have a higher piercing value. My character's strength, not very high at all, but these like things like crysteel and folded carbide, that gives you more piercing than like bronze or like one of the wood items. So not only are you hitting with bigger dice, but you're getting more piercing, which if you watched my damage tutorial means that you actually roll more dice. So you're rolling more big damage dice with these guys, so it's kind of multiplicative, the damage that you get from getting these better items. In addition, the strength cap gets higher. It's kind of hard to show that with this character because this strength it's meh, especially considering this is an endgame character. If you can get a huge strength bonus, like Fullerite just destroys. It's amazing. But it also, you need to have that high strength to be able to use it. There's one other thing I wanted to talk about, and that's Vibro Blades. So I've got a Vibro Kopesh. This does not give any piercing value because it matches your target's piercing value, which means you're always going to have, well, not always, but pretty much always have either one dice roll or it's just not going to penetrate the armor. But when it does, you get to roll a 1d10 plus 2. I think that was also something I forgot to mention is a lot of these items will just give you a +1. And also you can, there's, if I look at my tinkering, there's Vibro Blades, which are like the Vibro Kopesh, but you can find the blueprint for them. The Vibro Kopesh you have to get from a certain rare character or one of their clones. But these things you can find blueprints from merchants, and you can find Vibro Blades occasionally in dungeons. They're like the Vibro Kopesh, but you need to power them. They'll match the target's piercing value and give you a 1d10, so it's a decent dice roll. But it's not going to give you a lot of penetration, basically. Oh, so now I wanted to talk about sources. That's what I wanted to do next. So if we're talking about these items, in general, you start down in Joppa here. In the swamps, you're not going to find many things wielding weapons besides the villagers in Joppa. If you go up into the mountains, though, these mountains here, you'll start finding Snapjaws and the occasional hermit and novice of the Sightless Way. The Snapjaws are a good source of like bronze and iron weapons, so go for those guys first if you're trying to get better gear. Hermits and the Sightless Way tend to have steel, sometimes they'll have iron, and then if you go deep in the ground you'll find things that are tougher. If you go deeper down, be careful, because you'll be like, okay, I'm doing good, you'll go down to the next level, Snapjaw Shotgunner's gonna kill you. You know, like you want to be kind of careful with that stuff. So going deeper down, you'll find some enemies that might have some better gear. You'll occasionally find a dead body that has some good gear on them. If you want to find the next stuff like the steel and the carbide more reliably, there's some hermits that they usually have steel, but I think I've seen a couple with carbide. This whole jungle area of the map, that has a ton of goat folk in it, and goat folk tend to have carbide. You'll occasionally see folded carbide, and you'll occasionally see steel weapons, but their armor tends to be steel, so they're pretty good for gathering those types of materials. This is starting to get to kind of like spoilery parts, but some of the enemies, like legendaries, will usually have some better gear. The next ones, the Templars, you don't really want to mess with those guys till basically the late game, like when you're in your like level 20s range. But those dudes tend to have Fullerite gear and Christsteel gear, and sometimes flawless Christsteel. Like they have really good gear. They'll also occasionally have folded carbide, but they tend to usually have Fullerite or better. And so they're like big, bulky, inbred humans that hate mutants. If you're a Trukin, they'll be your best buddies, but if you're a mutant, they'll attack you on sight. You will also occasionally meet some higher level dervishes of the Sightless Way. They tend to have some Christsteel and flawless Christsteel gear, but also tends to be extra dimensional, which is going to rely on your mental attack instead of your piercing value. So it's like the normal item, but it relies on a different stat for determining how many dice rolls you'll get. So those guys, they've got high mental attacks, so you want to be careful if you're a strength dude. These guys will come in and just like slash you to death. There's also if you want to get some of this really good gear like Zetachrome, there's two ways to do it. You can go really, really deep Oh, sorry, really quick. Templars are like on the eastern side of the map over here. You'll see them in the jungles and some of the ruins to get the fullerite. Anyways, back to Zetachrome. Zetachrome I've only found literally at the end of the game, like after I totally beat all the main story line stuff. When I was delving down really deep, I mean like 20 levels plus, then I started to find Zetachrome being sold by Dromad merchants and occasionally just lying on the ground near dead bodies. Also, I forgot to mention Dromad guards. You're not going to be killing those guys really until this state in the game too, because they're really, really tough. But they tend to have folded carbide, fullerite, crysteel, and flawless crysteel gear. Most of it's fullerite, but they can have some of the really good stuff, especially the traders, if you're in the right area. Also, one really good, easy source of fullerite is the Asphalt Mines. You go up here to the Asphalt Mines right here. It's a unique dungeon. You need to be kind of careful in there because when you get to, I think it's level 20, 29 or something like that, there's a lot of lava, and there's things that like worker ants or fire ants which will shoot fire at you and catch you on fire, and magma crabs which will just crush you in 1 or maybe 2 hits if you're lucky. But if you are fast and you have a good source of water or blood, if you make them bleed, you can just pour the blood on you to stop the fire, and you can kite them around and find all kinds of great fullerite as well as decently advanced tech like laser rifles and Angan rifles and stuff like that. So that's a good source of some of those harder to get gears. It, in my mind, at least for my build, was pretty safe because I was very quick and I was able to run around and just shoot these things, these magma crabs. I would imagine if you aren't able to do that, that would be a really tough place, but for me it was a really good source of fullerite and like an Angan rifle or 2. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to cover. Thank you for joining me. This has been Orange One.